Welcome, anointed ones. There's a moment in every courtroom where silence becomes louder than any argument, where confidence doesn't just crack, it shatters. And it happened the second their lawyer slid that old text message across the table and watched your face for the reaction that never came. Because what they pulled wasn't just evidence, it was proof that you'd been 10 steps ahead the entire time. Here's what most people don't understand about high-stakes legal battles. Lawyers don't panic when the other side has evidence. They panic when the evidence reveals that their entire strategy was predicted, documented, and countered before they even thought of it. That text message they just discovered, the one they thought would destroy you, didn't just match their defense word for word. It exposed something far more dangerous. You knew exactly what they were going to do before they did it. Think about what that means for a second. Someone spent months building a case, crafting arguments, rehearsing narratives, only to realize that every move they made was already accounted for in a message you sent weeks or months prior. That's not luck. That's not coincidence. That's a level of awareness that forces even the most experienced attorneys to pause, reread, and silently ask themselves, what the hell are we actually dealing with here? This isn't just about winning a legal fight. This is about operating on a plane where foresight becomes your weapon and patience becomes your shield. The room shifted the moment that text appeared. You could feel it. The opposing counsel's confidence evaporated. Their client's smugness turned into confusion. Even your own lawyer had to suppress a reaction because nobody expected documentation that precise. And the beauty of it, you didn't need to say a word. The text spoke for you. It didn't just defend your position. It dismantled theirs completely, proving that while they were scheming in the present, you were already living in their future. If this resonates with you, if you've ever been underestimated only to reveal you were documenting everything all along, hit that like button right now. Subscribe, because we're breaking down exactly how this level of strategic awareness works and why it leaves people shaking in courtrooms, boardrooms, and every space where power is tested. Drop a comment if you've ever had a moment where your preparation made someone else's plan collapse. This conversation is for those who move in silence and let results scream. Let's get into it. Most people operate emotionally. When conflict hits, they respond with anger, fear, or desperation. They fire off messages, make phone calls, and try to defend themselves in the moment. You did something different. You stayed calm enough to document. While they were panicking, you were preserving evidence. While they were arguing, you were creating a paper trail. That discipline separates those who survive legal battles from those who dominate them. Documentation isn't just about keeping receipts. It's about creating an unshakable foundation that no lawyer can twist, no narrative can rewrite, and no amount of gaslighting can erase. When you sent that text, you weren't just communicating. You were building a fortress of clarity that would stand months later when memories faded and stories changed. That's strategic thinking at its finest, operating with the understanding that today's conversation could become tomorrow's evidence. The moment their lawyer pulled that text, they realized something terrifying. You weren't just involved in the situation, you were studying it. You understood the patterns, anticipated the moves, and created documentation that would later prove your awareness was sharper than their entire legal team's preparation. That's not paranoia. That's precision. That's the difference between someone caught off guard and someone who saw the storm coming from miles away and built shelter before the first drop of rain fell. What makes this even more powerful is that you didn't announce your strategy. You didn't tell anyone you were keeping records. You simply moved with the quiet understanding that truth needs preservation, and that in any conflict, the person with the clearest evidence controls the narrative. Now that text sits in the courtroom like a bomb they can't defuse, and every argument they planned suddenly looks like amateur hour compared to your documented foresight. Here's something lawyers understand, but most people miss. Evidence is only as strong as the credibility of the person who created it. A panicked, emotional message full of accusations and desperation gets torn apart in cross-examination. But a calm, measured, factual communication, that's unshakable. When their lawyer read your text and saw how composed you were during chaos, it did more than provide information. It established you as a reliable narrator in a room full of liars. Your text didn't sound defensive. It didn't sound angry. It sounded like someone who knew exactly what was happening, understood the implications, and chose to respond with clarity instead of emotion. That tone alone carries weight in legal proceedings because it signals awareness, control, and truthfulness. Judges, juries, and opposing counsel all recognize the difference between someone scrambling to cover tracks and someone calmly stating facts because they have nothing to hide. This is why your silence during confrontation mattered so much. While they were spinning stories, raising voices, and creating drama, you were observing, processing, and documenting with surgical precision. That restraint translated into evidence that looks unbiased, factual, and impossible to discredit. When their lawyer tried to find holes in your text, they couldn't. Because you weren't reacting emotionally, you were reporting reality. And reality doesn't have plot holes. The psychological impact of this cannot be overstated. Their entire case was built on the assumption that you were unstable, unreliable, or unaware. Then this text surfaces, showing the exact opposite. You were composed, articulate, and frighteningly accurate in your assessment of what they would try to do. That credibility shift changes everything. It forces the other side to recalibrate, second-guess, and realize they're not just fighting your claims, they're fighting your documented awareness that predicted their every move. The real devastation wasn't just that your text existed. It was what the text contained. You didn't just describe events. You outlined their likely response, their probable defense, and the exact arguments they would use, word for word. That level of prediction isn't luck. It's pattern recognition. It's understanding human behavior, legal strategy, and manipulation tactics so deeply that you could write their script before they even rehearsed it. Think about what that does to opposing counsel's confidence. They spent weeks crafting what they thought was a bulletproof defense, only to discover you'd already mapped it out in a casual text message sent before they even filed paperwork. That's not just embarrassing, it's destabilizing. It forces them to question whether anything they're doing is original or if you've already anticipated every move they're planning to make next. This kind of foresight comes from experience, observation, and the ability to step outside emotion and analyze situations objectively. While they were reacting to what happened, you were thinking 3 steps ahead. You understood that people follow patterns, that legal strategies are predictable, and that those who manipulate always use the same playbook. So you documented your predictions. And now, those predictions are being read aloud in a courtroom as undeniable proof of your awareness. What makes this truly powerful is that it shifts you from defendant to decoder. You're no longer just defending yourself. You're exposing the mechanics of their deception. Every argument they make now feels scripted, stale, and exactly like what you said they would do. That removes their element of surprise, strips away their perceived cleverness, and leaves them standing in a courtroom where their entire strategy was predicted by the person they underestimated. That's checkmate delivered in text form. There's a specific moment in confrontation when power shifts. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's a pause, a hesitation, a look exchanged between opposing lawyers that says, "We didn't account for this." That moment happened when your text was read aloud, because it didn't just contradict their claims. It revealed that you understood their intentions before they even acted on them. That's the kind of awareness that makes people nervous. Confidence in legal strategy relies on information asymmetry. They believe they know something you don't. They assume they can control the narrative because they think you're unaware of their tactics. But your text shattered that assumption completely. It proved you weren't just aware, you were ahead. You saw the trap being built and documented it in real time. Now they're standing in a courtroom, holding a strategy you already dismantled before it was even deployed. This is why preparation matters more than aggression. You didn't need to yell, threaten, or intimidate anyone. You just needed to be observant, patient, and precise. While they were focused on creating a convincing story, you were focused on preserving truth. And truth, when documented clearly and calmly, is an unstoppable force. It doesn't need embellishment. It doesn't need performance. It just needs to exist, and it will dismantle every lie built around it. The psychological impact on their side is profound. They went from feeling in control to feeling exposed, from believing they had the upper hand to realizing they were playing a game you'd already won. That shift doesn't just affect their legal strategy. It affects their confidence, their decision-making, and their willingness to continue fighting. Because when someone realizes their opponent predicted every move, the fight starts feeling futile. And that's exactly the position you've put them in. Here's where this gets truly dangerous for them. Your text didn't just address the immediate situation. It revealed a pattern, a recurring behavior, a system of manipulation they've used before and assumed would work again. By documenting not just what happened, but how it connects to previous actions, you turned a single incident into evidence of systemic deception. That's the difference between defending yourself and dismantling their entire credibility. Lawyers understand patterns. Judges understand patterns. Once a pattern of behavior is established, isolated incidents stop looking like misunderstandings and start looking like intentional misconduct. Your text connected dots they hoped would stay separated. It showed that their current defense isn't a one-time response. It's a rehearsed tactic they've deployed repeatedly. And now that pattern is documented, time-stamped, and undeniable. This is why your awareness was so critical. You weren't just reacting to what they did. You were studying how they operate. You recognized the cycle, the manipulation, the predictable responses. And instead of just calling it out emotionally, you documented it factually. Now that documentation sits in a courtroom, and every argument they make reinforces the pattern you already exposed. They're not just fighting your claims. They're fighting their own history. The power of pattern recognition cannot be overstated. It transforms isolated conflicts into proof of character. It shows that what they're doing now isn't an exception. It's their operating system. And when a lawyer realizes the opposing side has documented not just one event, but an entire behavioral pattern, the case changes completely. Because patterns are harder to defend, harder to justify, and impossible to dismiss as coincidence. You didn't just win this battle, you mapped the entire war. The most underrated power move in any confrontation is silence. Not the silence of fear or avoidance, but the silence of someone who knows their evidence is stronger than any words they could speak. When that text was presented, you didn't need to elaborate, defend, or explain. The document spoke for itself, and that restraint carried more authority than any passionate defense ever could. Silence forces people to sit with truth. It removes distraction, eliminates emotional noise, and makes the facts unavoidable. While they were preparing counter-arguments, rehearsing explanations, and trying to spin the narrative, you simply let the text exist. No performance, no theatrics. just documented reality that couldn't be twisted, reframed, or dismissed. That's the kind of power most people never access because they're too busy talking when they should be listening to their own evidence, destroy the opposition. This approach also protects you from manipulation. The moment you start over-explaining, you give them openings to twist your words, question your motives, or paint you as unreliable. But when you stay silent and let documentation do the work, there's nothing to attack. The text is clear. The facts are undeniable. Your credibility is preserved by restraint, and their attempts to discredit you fall flat because you're not giving them ammunition. What makes this even more effective is the psychological impact on observers. Judges, juries, mediators, they all recognize the difference between someone desperately defending themselves and someone calmly presenting facts. Your silence communicated confidence, truth, and preparation. It signaled that you don't need to convince anyone because the evidence is irrefutable. And that quiet authority is more persuasive than any argument, more credible than any testimony, and more devastating than any cross-examination could ever be. They thought pulling that text would help their case. They believed it would show something in their favor, expose some weakness, or create doubt about your position. Instead, it became the exact evidence that destroyed their entire defense. That's not just ironic. That's strategic brilliance. You created documentation so precise that even when used against you, it worked for you. That's a level of preparation most people can't even imagine. This happens when you document with absolute honesty and clarity. You weren't trying to manipulate perception or craft a narrative that sounded good. You were stating facts, outlining observations, and predicting outcomes based on observable patterns. That authenticity meant there was nothing to hide, nothing to spin, and nothing that could be weaponized. When they tried to use your words against you, those words simply reflected truth. And truth doesn't have a side. It just exposes lies. The lawyer's face when they realized what they'd done must have been priceless. They thought they had a smoking gun. Instead, they handed you the evidence that proved your case better than anything your own lawyer could have introduced. That's what happens when someone moves with integrity, awareness, and strategic documentation. Every piece of evidence becomes a shield because there's no deception to uncover, no inconsistency to exploit, and no weakness to target. This is the ultimate form of control in conflict. You don't just defend against attacks. You build your position so solidly that attacks strengthen it. Every move they make, every document they pull, every argument they raise, it all reinforces your narrative because your narrative was built on truth from the beginning. They can't win against that. They can only exhaust themselves trying to find holes that don't exist, while you sit calmly knowing that every piece of evidence, even theirs, works in your favor. In any battle, legal or otherwise, the person with the clearest understanding of what's happening controls the outcome. Your text proved something undeniable. You weren't just present in the situation. You understood it. You saw the dynamics, recognized the manipulation, predicted the response, and documented it all with frightening accuracy. That level of awareness is rare, and when it's revealed in a courtroom, it changes everything. Awareness separates reactive people from strategic ones. Reactive people respond to what's happening. Strategic people anticipate what will happen and prepare accordingly. Your text was proof of strategic thinking. It showed you weren't caught off guard, weren't operating on emotion, and weren't hoping for the best. You were calculating outcomes, protecting yourself, and creating documentation that would serve you when needed. That's the mindset of someone who wins. This awareness also exposes their lack of it. While you were thinking ahead, they were acting impulsively, While you were documenting facts, they were creating lies. While you were building a case, they were building a house of cards. And now, that house is collapsing because your awareness created a foundation of truth they can't shake. Every argument they make sounds hollow compared to the precision of your documented observations. The legal system rewards awareness. Judges recognize preparation, juries trust credibility, and opposing counsel fears opponents who clearly understand more than they're letting on. Your text communicated all of that in a few documented sentences. It wasn't just evidence, it was a declaration, a statement that said, "I see you, I understand what you're doing, and I've already accounted for it." That's not just defense. That's dominance achieved through awareness, patience, and strategic documentation that most people never think to create. There's a specific kind of embarrassment that happens when someone's elaborate plan is exposed as obvious and predictable. That's what your text did. It revealed that their carefully crafted defense wasn't clever, wasn't original, and wasn't even surprising. It was exactly what you said it would be. That doesn't just undermine their case. It undermines their credibility, their competence, and their authority in the room. Think about what that does to their position. They spent time, money, and energy building a strategy they thought was sophisticated. Then, a text surfaces showing you predicted it casually, almost offhandedly, before they even finalized it. That makes them look amateur. It makes their lawyers look unprepared. It makes their entire approach seem like a script you'd already read and discarded as too predictable to take seriously. This is the power of being underestimated. They assumed you weren't paying attention, weren't smart enough to see through them, or weren't strategic enough to protect yourself. That assumption made them careless. It made them predictable, and it gave you the advantage of moving invisibly while they broadcast every move. Now their scheme is exposed not as brilliant, but as basic, and that exposure is more damaging than any argument your lawyer could make. The psychological blow of this cannot be overstated. When someone realizes their best effort was predicted and documented by the person they underestimated, it doesn't just hurt their case, it hurts their confidence. They start second-guessing every decision, questioning whether anything they're doing is secure, and wondering what else you might have documented that they don't know about yet. That paranoia becomes a weapon you didn't even have to sharpen. Their own awareness of your awareness is doing the work for you. Revenge is loud, messy, and often ineffective. Truth is quiet, clean, and absolutely devastating. You didn't need to plot, scheme, or retaliate. You just needed to document reality and wait for the right moment. That moment came when their lawyer pulled your text, and in that instant, truth did what revenge never could. It dismantled their entire position without you lifting a finger beyond pressing send months ago. This is the power of patience. While they were focused on short-term manipulation, you were building long-term protection. While they were trying to control the narrative in the moment, you were creating documentation that would control it permanently. That's strategic thinking that transcends emotion and operates on a level most people never access because they're too busy reacting to think ahead. Truth also protects you legally and ethically. You didn't fabricate evidence, twist facts, or manufacture situations. You simply recorded what happened, what you observed, and what you predicted. That integrity means you never have to worry about your documentation being discredited because it's rooted in reality, and reality, when preserved accurately, is the most powerful weapon in any conflict. It needs no embellishment. It needs no defense. It simply is, and it destroys everything built on lies. The beauty of letting truth handle revenge is that it's irreversible. They can't negotiate with it, can't spin it, and can't make it disappear. Your text exists, The facts it contains are undeniable. The predictions it made came true. And now they're sitting in a courtroom watching their entire strategy unravel because you chose documentation over retaliation, truth over revenge, and awareness over anger. That's not just winning. That's rewriting the rules of engagement entirely. What happened in that courtroom wasn't just about a single text message or a legal victory. It was about proving that awareness, preparation, and strategic documentation create power that manipulation, deception, and aggression can never match. You didn't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You just needed to be the most prepared. And that preparation turned their weapon into your shield, their confidence into confusion, and their scheme into evidence of your superior awareness. Every point we've covered, from documenting when others were reacting, to staying calm under pressure, to predicting their strategy, to letting silence amplify your evidence, it all demonstrates one truth. The person who thinks ahead, moves with integrity, and creates clear documentation doesn't just survive conflict. They dominate it. And they do it without drama, without noise, without needing revenge, because truth does the work for them. This is the power of being underestimated. They assumed you weren't paying attention. They believed their plan was too clever for you to see through. They convinced themselves you were unprepared, unaware, and easily defeated. And that assumption created the opening for you to document everything, predict their moves, and present evidence so precise it left their entire legal team speechless. That's not luck. That's mastery. If this resonated with you, if you've ever been in a position where your preparation made someone else's scheme collapse, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're diving deeper into strategic awareness, legal psychology, and the hidden dynamics of power that most people never see. Drop a like if this spoke to your experience. Leave a comment sharing your story of documented awareness that changed everything. And share this with anyone who needs to understand that silence, preparation, and truth will always outlast noise, manipulation, and lies. You didn't just win in that courtroom. You proved that the real power isn't in aggression. It's in awareness. It's in documentation. It's in moving so strategically that by the time your opponent realizes what you've done, it's already too late. That text wasn't just evidence. It was proof that you operate on a level they'll never reach. And that's why you're untouchable. Not because you're loud, but because you're prepared, aware, and always 10 steps ahead. Stay blessed. 2.